And here we are for another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat with the amazing Tonya Todd. I don't really need to introduce her because she's been on the show so many times. In fact, I think she has the record for the quickest return on Genuine Chit-Chat after her debut appearance. So you don't even need an excuse to come on the show anymore. But there is one. Because Tonya felt like her life wasn't busy enough with her being, an actor as well as a screenwriter and a teacher, as well as having the Ms. Marvel podcast she was doing and the She-Hulk podcast that she's been doing as well. She decided she needs even more time to just spend on podcasting, not guesting on other people's shows. So, Tonya, why don't you tell everyone, why do you like making yourself suffer? That's a whole other conversation that we were having before this. So I'm not going to ask that question.
That is a different conversation.
But with your podcast that you're launching, that's the day this comes out will be the start of the event. So when this launches, your first episode should be out. So please tell everyone about what your newest project is.
So it actually started before I became the host for the She-Hulk conversations. And what I'm doing is celebrating people's right to read with banned book conversations. So September 18th through 24th is Banned Books Week here. I think it might be the same week for you in the UK as well.
Maybe.
And what I'm doing is I'm bringing in different panels of people to read 7 different banned books. They're going to be posted to YouTube every day of Banned Books Week. And we're pretty much just discussing the different banned books, the reasons that they're banned, book banning in general, and then why we think people should read banned books. And Megan was one of my star guests.
Yes, and I haven't even heard that episode. So Megan went off and did a podcast, and I have no idea. Like, I knew vaguely about it, and she told me somewhat how it went. But Megan views herself quite lower than everyone else sees her. She's an incredible individual, and she's always like, why do people want me to come on these podcasts with you, Mike? Why does everyone always want me to be on these shows? And I'm like, because you're really insightful. You've got a lot of interesting things to say.
Right.
And then afterwards she was like, I feel like everyone else was way smarter than me. And I was like, don't, you went to...
No way. She was the teacher present on our conversation.
Exactly. It was like even when myself and Megan did the Fair Modern Film about Marie Antoinette. She was like schooling us about the French Revolution. And I was like, I knew there was a French Revolution. She was like, oh, well, actually, there were several. I was like, see, I didn't even know that. I know a little bit about everything, which really means I don't really know that much. Whereas Megan has like certain things she knows almost nothing about. But when she knows about stuff, she knows a lot. It's one of the things that I enjoy your afterthoughts conversations, because listening to her, I get to hear you all the time. And it's not that I don't love that, but I get to hear her perspective. And she's kind of snarky and she's funny and she's witty and she doesn't hold back when it's just the two of you. Yeah, she does. It's quite entertaining because often she'll be like, I can't really be bothered to do a podcast. And I'm like, okay, we'll make it a short one. And then it ends up being like half an hour, 40 minutes long. Like we recently recorded Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. So the last of our Harry Potter watch. It's meant to only be 10 minutes. It's recorded at 28 minutes. So, and she talks for the majority of the time. And it's quite bizarre.
Well, she's very passionate about Harry Potter. And that happens to be the book that we did.
It is. It was a nice little segue there. So why don't you tell us about these 7 books, the banned books in particular, and was there a list you found online that just had every banned book? How did you decide these? Were they books you'd already read? Like, what was the decision to choose these 7 in particular out of interest?
I had a combination of things. First, when I had this seed of an idea much earlier in the year, it was... part of being an activist is being active in my advocacy. So I need to do something. I had just come off of a film. I wasn't doing my 52 Love podcast anymore. And I had been working on several writing projects. It's like, okay, well, I have the author, I have the actress parts of my life going, but I'm also an activist and I need to be doing something toward that right now. So I thought about banned books and promoting anti-censorship, basically. So I posted something online and just a little teaser asking who reads banned books and which ones do you read and why do you read them, which was partially me getting ideas for which books to cover, but also seeing who might be interested in being a guest. Nobody knew what I was doing yet, but depending on the responses, these are going to be the pool of people I asked to be on the show. And I received some really great ideas. I'm so glad that I did it this way, because if I had just gone to a list or maybe the ones that come to my mind, I wouldn't have read so many new books probably. And so I contacted the different people. Like a few of them, the people's responses were so passionate. It was like, all right, yeah, I'm definitely doing this one. You know, they'll say, there's this book and this book and this book. They're just answering the question of what recommendations I might have. And then they go on this like little rant about a specific book. Like, all right, well, that's the one you're doing, you know. And you'll have to watch the series to see who those are, because it comes up during the conversations. But ultimately, I ended up with Stamped Racism, Anti-Racism in You, Beloved by Toni Morrison, Genderqueer, Front Desk, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or the Sorcerer's Stone, depending on where you live.
Nope, Philosopher's Only, Sorcerer's Stone. They don't even call it that in the bloody book, do they? Do they call it the Philosopher's Stone in the book, in the American version?
I believe so.
There we go. Stupidity.
Yeah, I did look up why they changed it, and they didn't think that people would be kids would be interested in a Philosopher's Stone. Like, I really don't see anyone interested in this type of book being like, you know what, though, it says philosopher.
I know, it's madness. It's just like, oh,
give children some credit.
Yeah, the Sorcerer's Stone. It's like, well, I mean, I think Nicholas Flamel was not really even a sorcerer. He was a noted alchemist. So actually, it should be the Alchemist's Stone. But anyway, sorry.
Yes, let's go on that tangent, Mike. The last two books are The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, which I always say wrong, which is why I have to look at it when I'm saying it. And then, of course, the classic 1984, which Tony and Jack of Comics in Motion came to discuss. They were two who were extremely passionate about it. They were awesome guys for that show.
Yeah. Yeah, see,
teachers, you know.
Sorry. Yeah, it's funny because I haven't even heard of any of those books apart from Harry Potter and 1984. You know, I've seen the movie of 1984, which I know a lot of people don't like, and I was one of those people. I watched it knowing the general context. I was like, this movie is not good. It is really boring and goes nowhere.
You've never heard of Beloved?
No.
Wow. I recommend you read it.
I've heard the word Beloved. I haven't heard any. I've not consumed any content that's called Beloved.
Have you heard of Toni Morrison?
I know the surname Morrison, but I know that that's connected with so many other famous individuals that...
Like Jim Morrison?
Yes, that's one of them. We also have a supermarket over here called Morrison's, so that doesn't help. But, yeah, the thing is...
Well, I'm here to enlighten you, Mike.
That's why I've got you on it.
Want to read Toni Morrison.
I mean, you and Tony especially, which entertains me greatly because your name is almost like the feminine version of Tony, or Tony
right,
is the masculine version of Tonya, however you want to play it. But it's quite funny that you two are such massive readers and things. Probably two of the most... I'd say, obviously, as Comics in Motion has expanded and things, we've got individuals such as Ada on there, who I've watched recently, people like Alison Shelton, etc., that have kind of come into genuine chit-chat. Before
both guests on my show.
Boom. I knew that. I didn't know that. But, you know, people like that who are very well-read. You know, with you and Tony, you're two of the most well-read individuals I know. And I've read a fair few books, but I've not read any classics at all. Like, I think I've read Of Mice and Men, and that was due to school. And I thought it was all right. And then I think that's really it. I really don't read much classic literature. And the problem is, this was my excuse and I'm sticking by it. There's so much Star Wars to read. I'm just it took me, you know, I only listened to the audiobook of Sense and Sensibility 3 or 4 months ago. I've never consumed any Jane Austen content of any kind. I've never seen a movie. I haven't even seen Clueless, which I think is either a Jane Austen or a Shakespeare
it's
adaptation.
Emma.
Yeah, I've got the Emma movie with Anya Taylor-Joy on Netflix flagged to watch, but I haven't watched it yet. What's the Little Women? I only watched that first time the other day, and Megan said I had to watch it because I've been watching Friends all the way through, and there's a point in that where Joey reads
Little Women,
yes, and it's a spoiler, and she was like, you have to watch Little Women before you get to the episode, and I was like, okay, so we watched Little Women. Great film. I can barely
see how much
anything.
She loves you. She protects you from the spoilers.
Yeah, but think about how many spoilers I protect you from now. I'm like your
I know,
the knight. I get people giving me in certain in the Discord, I know people get agitated by me being like, "This is kind of a spoiler." People are like, "Is it really a spoiler?" And I'm like, I know that there are certain individuals, mainly Tonya, who will not have seen this. So yes, it is a spoiler. I mean, I found with Thor: Love and Thunder, the fact they have Jane Foster on every fucking poster, and apart from one, and I was like, "What? Why are you having all these things? Just." Not just Jane Foster either, like her in full Thor gear. And you're like, well, you're just ruined immediately. The first half hour of the film is just obvious. So, I've tried. But yeah, I've not read really any classic literature. That's one of the main places that I am very, very inept in. I just know very little about that kind of thing.
Well, I do recommend Toni Morrison just because it's beautiful literature. Not for the reasons it was banned, but that too. I think that these were banned for all different reasons. And that was one of the particulars that helped me choose between all of the recommendations that I had, is I wanted to have a variety of reasons that they were banned and different styles of authors and different years that they were written and different genres. So I ended up with a graphic memoir, which is, like a graphic novel, but it's a memoir told in graphic novel style, which was a surprise to me. I had chosen it before I even realized that part, but it was a bonus. I ended up, with 1984 as a classic, Stamped as a nonfiction book that deals with racism in America. And Dave was actually on that show. And he said, I'm not sure I'm the right person for this book, but it opened up a discourse that crossed the globe. So I think that he was the perfect person for it. And he had wonderful insights about it. I think he actually read it twice in preparation for it, maybe more. Like, it's not that long of a book, but so far I haven't been disappointed with a single person who is on the show. They've all brought unique perspectives, and it opens up a conversation between different types of people. I will say that I presumed that everyone was going to have the same opinions on things because of the circle with which I run. You expect that people are going to have a similar mindset, but we didn't all have the same mindset. There was some discussion and disagreement about whether any book should ever be banned and what the reasons should be. And I think it's important for us to have those conversations. So I'm glad that we didn't. It wasn't just a group of people saying, yes, I agree with you. Good job. I agree with you too. That would be banned books validation. And that's not what we were doing. We were actually having conversations about the things that we don't like to see in books and the things that trouble us, but also the right to protect the freedom to read what you want to read, even if you don't like it, even if other people don't like it. Who are you to tell other people what they're allowed to read?
Yeah. It's one of those things.
Imagine if Star Wars with appropriate content and you were not allowed to consume it anymore.
Well, there is actually a Japanese exclusive High Republic novel that came out, and a lot of people are very angry about that. So it's not. I don't think you can even get a translation for it. I think they only released it. Yeah, I think it's China actually. I can't. If it's either China or Japan, I think it might be China though. And I know that there's a lot of censorship stuff, obviously, over with China, and Disney make a lot of allowances for China, and they make certain posters of certain characters cut out. Finn, sorry, who said that? And it's things like that where they do, and they cut out certain scenes. And obviously, there was a big hullabaloo. I think it was Saudi Arabia made a fuss about. I think it was the gay kiss in Eternals or one of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, for fuck's sake. Well, the pandering is just ridiculous. I mean, I'm one of those people who's just like, if this offends any people who've been on the banned books thing, then I apologise. But I just think if you are going to try and tell people to censor stuff, you need to just shut the fuck up. Because the problem is the issue isn't what do you censor. The issue is who decides what you censor. And the problem is as soon as you allow anyone to choose to censor anything, it becomes their agenda. If you decide, like I'm not advocating for loads of people to go out and read Mein Kampf because it's got a lot of problematic things in it. However, if you say that you can't read Mein Kampf because it's obviously a very extremist thing written by Hitler, and obviously that's a very problematic element, then you go, okay, well, you can't read anything to do with any other problematic people in history. And then it's, well, what do you then define as problematic? Obviously, you start at the top, you go Hitler, you go Stalin, you go, the big hitters of genocide. But then if you really look at it, you go, well, what about Britain? And, Gandhi was against us, and we all hold Gandhi up in such high regard, but we were the ones who oppressed him. So what about famous writers in Britain at the time of, what if there was a famous writer who was an advocate for some of the genocide that Britain caused? Are they complicit in these sort of things? And if so, should you ban their works? And once you start asking these sort of questions, and it's one of the things I've had with comedy as well, because I've had arguments with people as well about censoring jokes. I know Ricky Gervais is a very famous English comic who talks about these things, and it's always like, the problem is, as soon as you censor one joke because a group of people are offended, you have to censor every joke. If in South Park, the guys in South Park say
because it's going to offend somebody. Exactly.
It's like South Park had this whole thing against Comedy Central because there's an episode they did where they showed the Prophet Muhammad, and they actually did it about 10 seasons prior to that, an episode called Super Friends, and you had, I think, Jesus and Superman and Muhammad doing crazy fun things. And no one made a fuss, no one cared. But then flash forward to 10 years, and then everyone had a fuss about showing the Prophet Muhammad, and it was they wanted to, and Comedy Central just wouldn't let them. As a Comedy Central, they just put a black
they censored
box
them
over it, and South Park guys were not happy. They were like, if you fucking do that again, we're going. Because it was just, and it was because of fear. Obviously, a lot of things of, I think, the Charlie Hebdo stuff hadn't happened yet, but there was still, it was post 9/11, so there's all that sort of the worry and concern about extremists and things. And it's just like, the problem is, as soon as you make an allowance for one group, you have to make an allowance for everyone. If you do it for one religious group, why should Islam be able to choose which books get banned, but Catholicism or Judaism can't, or any? And that's my issue with censorship. I'm not saying, there's certain books where people should maybe be dissuaded from reading, or even books that maybe you can only read in a library, you can never take it out. Maybe if there's some books that are very extreme in that, like you can't take it home, you can't do anything like that. You can only read it.
Like what?
I don't know. I don't know
like
enough
the Anarchist Cookbook?
No, but I have not read Mein Kampf, so I don't know what it says in it. This is an example because I'm so inept and not very knowledgeable.
And see, that's the thing. A lot of people who are taking this offense, they haven't even read the material.
Yeah.
They've heard that there are these things present in the material, and thus they want it to be taken down. What you should do is read it, learn about it, and then arm yourself for a conversation about how that makes you feel and how it makes others feel and how those words have power and what they can do. But if you're not reading the material, you're not armed for the conversation.
Exactly. That's the problem. And I have that with censorship of everything. I just think that there's a degree of, I think there should be barriers. I think there should be, I'm not saying, hey, let's let little Timmy, who's 7 years old, watch all the Saw films. That's stupid. That's only going to damage them. And letting them read, like Mouse is probably the most controversial book I've read. And it's probably the best book I've ever read. And we tackled that on the Comic Submission Book Club a while ago. And I'd never even heard of it before reading it. And Megan just happened to have a copy, but she's never read it either. But that book really was important and incredible, and that is a kind of book where I'd be like, right, you need to probably be either quite a mature teenager or maybe more of an adult to read it. So sort of a mature 14 or 15-year-old, or maybe more of an 18 to 20-year-old, probably, to be able to read that and really learn the right things from it. Because there's, have you read Mouse? I don't want to spoil things.
I have it in my closet.
Okay, cool. There's a scene, there's a very minor spoiler, but it's not really a spoiler because it's real events, but there's a scene in it where Mouse is an autobiography, it's a biography about this guy, and his grandfather was a Jew who was basically a Jew at the time of the Holocaust. I think he lived in Poland, and he went into concentration camps, that sort of thing. Just for anyone who's unaware, and it's written in a very clever way, and I won't spoil any sort of things, but there is a scene where some German soldiers are grabbing children and just slamming them against walls just to kill them, just to get rid of them, while they're closing down these concentration camps and things, and they don't know what to do with all these people, so they're just killing them in all these horrible ways. And the specific scene, where they're like grabbing children by the ankles, slamming them against things, and the graphic novel, you don't see children having that happen to them. You see one page of it, and the people in it are anthropomorphized, so I'm not going to delve into all that because we spoke about that. Check out the Comics Emotion Book Club because we delve into all that. But that sort of thing, I wouldn't want a 10-year-old to read a book about and seeing this kind of thing happen where they're hearing about that kind of atrocity. But I'm not saying 10-year-olds shouldn't be taught about the Holocaust. I'm just saying they need to be taught about it the right way. It's like sex. I feel like children should learn about sex, but you don't show a 5-year-old hardcore pornography. You just say things like, if they ask, you go, yeah, if a man and a woman love each other very much, they give each other a special cuddle, and then babies can be made. And then hopefully that's enough for them. And then as when they're older, they'll ask further questions, and you can, depending on the child, depending on the situation, depending on what they're asking, you can give correct information that isn't lying, but it's, you know, you have to kind of read your audience. You can't, that's kind of where I'm at, where it's like, if there are certain issues and there are certain things that could be problematic, just make it so that not everyone can pick it up with a snap of the fingers. You know, it's, and I feel like that way with certain elements of I feel like.
How would you do that? How would you make sure that people couldn't pick it up at the snap of their fingers?
I mean, now with the internet, it's basically impossible anyway. So I haven't read a book that I don't think anyone could read, but I apologize also for any listeners because I'm quite ill at the moment. So if you notice with the video version, I'm sneezing and blowing my nose and I sound all gross, that's why. But I haven't read a book that's so controversial that I feel like you couldn't. But it's just age ratings is probably the easiest way to go about it. It's just, you know, don't let an 8-year-old watch a Saw movie. But when I was 12 or 10, I was watching Predator and Aliens and things like that because I was fine with violence. So it's not even a rule for everyone. It's just a vague thing of, yeah, don't sell a child a bottle of vodka because it's just not a smart thing to do. But so you have that thing where they have to be a certain age to be able to consume that sort of thing. It's just a way that if you are an adult, you can make your own mind up. You can do whatever you want. Or even with like South Park, for example, at the start, it's that thing, the kind of warning that comes up in a sense, you know, just everything in this is fictional, parody, blah, don't really take it seriously. At the start of The Boys or Game of Thrones or whatever it says, there's some very triggering scenes in this. Be aware, you know, if you're young, you probably shouldn't let your kids watch a rape scene, you know, things like that. I'm not saying that sort of stuff should never be.
I don't think anyone's making them watch stuff or read stuff. It's just
but how they find it.
It's not like it's Clockwork Orange. Like you will watch it.
Oh, that's a banging movie. But you know what I mean? It's just a like parental lock. I think that makes sense. If when I eventually have kids, I'll be putting parental locks on the internet and on TV. And I'm not saying
right, you will do that. You will choose to do that. It's not your government telling you that you have to do this or forcing it on you.
Well, yeah.
No one else is telling you that you can do it.
To a degree. I mean,
or that you must do it.
You can't, when I was, you know, when video games or movies are 15 or 18s or over there, I know it's R-rated, unless you have a parent or a fake ID, a 12-year-old can't go in and watch an R-rated movie. So I don't even think they can if they have got a parent with them. But that's your government or a governmental body preventing someone from consuming a certain piece of content. But it's not saying no one can consume it. It's just saying you have to be of a certain age to do it. That's kind of where I stand on it. But even then, I'm a bit like, when I have kids, I've argued with this with Megan. I'm like, depending on our kid, I'll let them watch Predator and Aliens when they're 12 or 13. I don't give a fuck. Like, that's what I did when I was a kid. But if I have a kid who's really squeamish and is really freaked out about that stuff, I'm not going to throw them in the deep end and go, hey, on your 12th birthday, let's watch all these horrendous films. It'll be like, let's start with Coraline, see how you deal with that. If you're freaked out about Coraline, wind it back a couple of years and we'll try again later. If you watch Coraline and think that's the coolest thing I've ever seen, oh my God, we go to the next quite dark film. We'll try a bit of, you know, Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke, maybe, just the things which just edge in certain elements closer and closer to that and test the waters, you know. It's also a build-up. You have to, it's like a tolerance, isn't it? That's kind of how I view it as well. You don't start with the most heinous, horrendous thing possible. You work your way up to it.
But again, what you're saying is you do this, not someone else telling you what you're allowed to do with your child.
Yeah.
And by removing books from libraries and schools, you're preventing them from getting that information.
Oh, yeah. I'm completely against actually banning books, to clarify. I'm just saying if there are books out there that could be considered seriously problematic, that if there were a degree of restrictions in place, I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but I don't want to necessarily say I'm for or against it because I haven't read a book that I feel like is so problematic that if someone read it, they just go off the deep end, if you know what I mean. I can't, because I haven't read enough literature.
There is a book that comes up in our conversations that made me question I would say that I 100% believe that we should not censor the books in terms of banning them. However, a book came up during the conversations that made me question that and reconsider that and think about that. Now, I still have come back to it. if we censor one, it opens up a door I don't want to open. Who gets to decide? But I do think that people should be informed about the book so that they can be aware and make sure that their child is not reading it if you don't think that it's appropriate for your child. And it was a board book, so it's definitely geared toward children. To me, it seems, I don't understand why this book was ever made. I don't know why anyone ever published it. It is horrific. I don't even know the name of it. I was just told about it. So I'm not being vague on purpose. I don't know what it's called, but I was told what happens in the book, and it is horrific for it to be the way it's presented as though it's okay to make someone do something that they don't want to do because they'll like it in the end.
Right.
That seems problematic to me. That doesn't mean it should be banned, but people should definitely be aware of it so that they can make an informed decision.
Yeah. Yeah. It does muddy waters. Once you, as you say, it's a term that unfortunately I think this term has been used quite a lot by some individuals who lean on the right of politics quite a lot, which is the slippery slope. You know, can't register people for guns because then we'll ban guns altogether. That's the general argument I hear in America. And I'm not going to get into a gun debate because that was a whole podcast and I'm British, so most people who have a strong opinion on that won't listen to me anyway, so whatever. But like, I agree. I just feel like nothing should be censored. I mean, I'm up for the Wild West almost. I'm like, all drugs should be legal, everything should be legal in certain ways, but
You're libertarian.
No, because libertarians are anti-government. I'm not anti-government. I just think all governments at the moment, for the most part, are quite shit. And there's not enough. The problem is when you give lawmakers all the power and all the money, why would they ever change the laws that give them all that?
They have no motivation.
Yeah, they're never going to change the system because they're the ones who benefit from the system and they're the ones who vote on, and they're the ones who would change the system. So that's never going to, or in theory, it's never going to happen unless everything collapses and stuff. But my issue is more so, I don't think, my opinion on drugs being legal, I don't think you should be able to go to Walmart and buy a pound of heroin. I think that's stupid. It's more so like the way alcohol is, you know, there's age restrictions. Everyone knows if you down a litre bottle of vodka or a litre bottle of whiskey, you will probably die if you chug that whole thing in one go, or at least get very bad alcohol poisoning. So alcohol,
but that's a lethal thing. Do you think books are lethal? Do you think media is lethal?
No. But in the same token, it's just, I'm not opposed to age restrictions. I'm not opposed to the idea that you either have to be of a certain age to consume a certain piece of content, or there has to be someone who is of that age who can buy it for you and show it to you, you know, that kind of thing. You know, as I said, the argument with Predator and Aliens, they're like 18 movies, but I watched them when I was like 13.
But then who gets to determine that it's not age appropriate for you? Because one of these books is a middle grade book and it is banned because of references to racism and the challenging immigrant experience. And those are difficult concepts that kids don't need to know. Why? This is stuff that's really happening to people.
Yeah, I disagree with that element, as in I don't think that should be banned. My thing is more just very graphic things, and like the book that was kind of vaguely mentioned, which is like teaching kids wrong lessons. You know, I don't think it should be. You shouldn't have a book that's for preschoolers that says if a friend does something you don't want them to do, grab a corkscrew from the drawer and stab them in the throat. I'm like, I would probably be like, yeah, you probably shouldn't let 5-year-olds read that in preschool. I think that's a fairly logical thing. Who votes on that? I don't know. But for me, it's kind of the extreme end, and you kind of have to rein in. You go, okay, let's not have any, you know, let's not have people being decapitated in anything for people under the age of 12. And you go, okay, that sounds fairly reasonable, I guess. But if it's humans, or what about vampires? You know, and if is there blood involved? Is there this? And it becomes a whole muddy water thing. I mean, it's also how things progress. Like nowadays, a 12A.
Vampires are people too.
Well, you are, but you're the exception. You're the day walker.
They're just not food.
But it's all about context, and that's the problem. I think it's very hard to judge, say, a book that has sexual violence in compared to a book that talks about serious issues about the Holocaust. They are two incredibly different things, and they will get interpreted in very different ways by different people.
Right.
But there are still important things to learn. You know, you should always teach children, don't force yourself upon them, don't do this. But if an 8-year-old can't, if you have 8-year-olds who haven't been taught about sex, you can't necessarily teach them about rape immediately. You have to build them up to it.
Consent. I mean, what you should be teaching is consent.
Exactly. Consent. Like there's the video that went around, I think it probably went around worldwide, but in the UK it was very popular, which was all about sexual advances comparing to drinking a cup of tea. And
yes, I did watch that.
Yeah, so if anyone who's not aware, it's basically like, you know, even if you make someone a cup of tea and you put the cup of tea in front of them and they said they wanted the cup of tea and then they decide at the last minute they actually don't want the cup of tea, even if the cup of tea is made and is in front of them, you can't then force them to drink it. It's their choice to put the tea in their body. And it's the same with everything else. You wouldn't force someone to drink a cup of tea. Therefore, you shouldn't force yourself upon them. It's that sort of thing. And that idea I completely agree with. If you teach a child the right lesson at a young age about consent and about violence, about this thing, you don't need to go to the extreme end. You can just be base lessons to teach them. Don't translate. It scales up. That's the term.
One of the suggestions that was made on a few of the panels was maybe having a warning section, like this is what's included in this book, so that you can make an informed decision. We're not going to remove the book. We're just letting you know these things happen in the book, and you can choose to read the spoiler page or not, because some people, they don't want to know ahead of time, but others who might be trying to decide whether this book is right for their child or not, they want to know what conversations am I about to have with my kid? And as much as I dislike spoilers, that seems like a fair compromise.
Yeah.
Because you still have the choice whether you read that spoiler page or not.
Yeah. Same with trigger warning.
There's a danger in removing information to the public. And what it does is it controls what you're allowing people to think. In fact, that's what comes up in 1984.
I was going to say, yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah, I agree completely. I think it's like compared to music, you know, when my first memory of it was with Eminem. You know, in all Eminem albums, it says parental advisory, explicit content. And that's just a warning to say, look, he swears a lot and he talks about some pretty horrendous stuff. And my parents were like, that's fine. Mike can deal with that. So I was listening to songs like Kim, where it's like a whole song about him killing his ex-partner. Right. It's very graphic and quite intense, and it's even now listening to it, I'm like, Jesus Christ. But, you know, it's got the warning. Same with everything. You watch certain movies at the start, it gives you the trigger warning or whatever. That's fine. That's how it should be. That's how I view age ratings on movies, on video games.
And yet they don't warn you if there's going to be a puke scene, you know? Like, come on.
Megan's like that with teeth brushing. She's like, why do they always have to brush their teeth? Like, can't they just show someone from the back brushing their teeth? I know what they're doing. Why is it relevant? And I'm like, well, most of the time when people brush their teeth on screen, there's no foam or anything. It's just dry brushing, which actually pisses me off more, because I'm like, who the fuck brushes their teeth like that? Unless you're in the middle of the wilderness. Like, and you just watch them brushing their teeth with nothing on it. And I'm like, why are you even showing this scene? What is this adding? Just have them come out the toilet with the assumption they've just done that. I don't need to see people brush their teeth. But that's a whole other thing. Back to the banned book stuff.
Your rabbit holes are fun.
If this was a different podcast, that would be interpreted very differently. But with the banned books then, so obviously you've done these 7 and you've recorded all of them. As of recording this, you've recorded all of them bar 1. But when this is released, all of them will be recorded and they'll be coming out daily. So do you think that you're going to do this again next year? Have you given that kind of thing any thought? I know I'm jumping the gun because no one's even listened to the other ones yet, but I'm just intrigued if this has opened up a can of worms.
No, it hasn't. I have already been prompted to continue it next year. It's like, it hasn't even come out yet. We don't even know if it's going to be a success or a failure yet, but people are interested enough in the topic that they want me to do it again. And I already have a pre-list of books to consider and more guests who maybe couldn't do it this time. Or I've realized, I should have asked this person. I should have asked this person. It's just that so many people were enthusiastic about it. I had to limit the number of people on the shows because, we could be here talking about a single book for 2 to 5 hours if we really wanted to. But I was trying to keep them closer to an hour conversation so that we were respecting people's time. So it feels like I'm very much being nudged in the direction of doing it again. And it's a lot, because when you're joining these people from all over the world, there are some serious time zones issues to consider.
I am well aware.
So, yeah, well, you are aware because you've been so helpful in letting me use your software so that I can join these people together without, I don't have my own professional Zoom account, but that's probably going to change if I'm doing this on the regular, right?
Yeah, well, the good thing is with you being so much time behind me that you can piggyback off mine for the most part. It only gets a bit complicated when there's lots of Star Wars series coming out and things. But because
right, and that's about to happen.
It is, yeah. But the good thing is we've got a few people who have got Zoom Pro accounts, so it works in that regard. But that's admin-y stuff. But yeah, it's one of those things.
But I still appreciate it. I mean, you were one of the people who's made it possible for me to do this. You did the wonderful poster for it. These are skills I don't have.
Yeah.
So are you really asking, am I going to have to do more artwork next year? Is that your real question?
No, I've already got I got a friend of mine who did some work around my house, who's a contractor, and I said I'd make him a new logo and stuff. And then Matt B. Lloyd has asked me to do artwork for a project him and Tony are doing. So I'm already doing that stuff anyway. So it's always one of those things.
You're good at it.
I'm not bad at it. It's more just I'm good if there's use royalty-free images, and I'm good at manipulation and putting things together, but I'm not very good at drawing, and I don't have a graphic design tablet. So
you're good at manipulation, huh?
I am, yes, very good. I'm so good, in fact, that most people don't just think I'm a really nice person when I'm actually steadily manipulating people. My whole thing with Genuine Chit-Chat is actually a lie. It's not honest conversations with interesting people. What it is it's me choosing people around the world in very, very specific points to create my own network and empire that over the following decades is going to it's going to seem like I'm just a nice person, but it's actually, I'm creating a cult, but people just don't realize it yet. That's actually what I'm doing.
And collecting them in the Comics in Motion Discord channel.
That's right. And I'm making myself, I'm doing, and this is going to be the nerdiest reference ever, but I'm making myself like Galen Erso in Rogue One. I'm realizing, I'm making it so people can't do this without me. I'm doing it so that you can't do podcasting without my Zoom account, without my podcasting logo creation.
Help
without
me, Obi Mike. You're my only help.
Yes, that's exactly it. But no, that's not really what I'm doing, just to clarify. But I said a joke to my friends. There's a game, a card game called Secret Hitler. And it's a game where you basically, it's a game where you lie to people. You're either fascists or you're liberals in the game, and no one knows what anyone else is. And you basically everyone's pretending to be a liberal. And the goal of the game, if you're a liberal, is to kill Hitler. And the goal, if you're Hitler, is to rise to power. It's this whole card game. But it's all about lying. And all my friends know I'm terrible at it. Because I'm really bad, because they say, it doesn't matter if you are or you're not lying. You always when you're in this game, you always seem to be like you are lying. So I hate playing it with my friends because I'm always the one who gets suspected first. So if I ever am Hitler or a fascist, I get killed immediately. But half the time when I'm a liberal, I get killed as well. And when you get killed, you just have to wait for the game to be over. So I've just outright refused to stop playing that game with my friends now, because they always think I'm lying. Better. Well, the thing is, I brought it up because I said to them the other day what I'm actually doing, because all my friends think I can't lie. So they're like, well, Mike, I know you're terrible at lying, because whenever you play these games, you are atrocious at them. So we know you can't lie very well. And I'm like, well, it's probably quite good if everyone around me thinks I'm a bad liar, because then when I do need to lie,
because then they won't suspect you.
Exactly.
When you take over the world.
That's the game. That's the game.
He's so confident. He's saying it right here for everyone to hear.
I am. That's how you know. That's how
that
you
is
know.
Some Hitler stuff. But I'm going to write a book about how I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to do it.
Yeah, it's but with banned books then, just sort of last thing, had you read all of these books prior to doing the podcast?
No, I hadn't read Genderqueer. I hadn't read Front Desk. I hadn't read Stamped, and I hadn't read Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. I hadn't even heard of Front Desk, Genderqueer, or Stamped before I did this. So those are ones that were recommended, and I'm so glad I read them. I've enjoyed every one of the books for different reasons, but they all touched me in a different way. I think Harry Potter is the one I enjoyed the least. And it's the one that is strictly entertainment, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I like Harry Potter, but I don't actually like the books that much. I don't actually like J.K. Rowling's writing very much. I read the first two, and when they were like first out and big and stuff, and I couldn't finish the third one. And then I bought the fifth one, and the fifth one's the hardest one to read. It's about 1 billion bloody pages. And so I couldn't even get through the fifth one when they came out, but I got into the movies and stuff. And I do not believe... I think J.K. Rowling is a lot like George Lucas in a lot of ways, where a lot of the ideas are brilliant, but certain execution of elements aren't right for me in certain ways. With George Lucas, it's script writing, and with J.K. Rowling, it's just... I found that when I was reading them, some of the way it's written, it was not... For a book series that's so popular, it's not as well written as it is popular. That's kind of what I'm getting at. It's kind of like 50 Shades of Grey
true.
In a different way.
Okay, but that's true for Twilight. I mean, Twilight was very popular, but those are not well-written books. They're extremely compelling, though. Yeah. They do touch into an emotion. But you cannot look at the prose and think, that's really great. You know, like that's a great sentence. We're not going to see that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's probably why. And it's one of those things. But obviously I appreciate the books and the world and the amount of kids that got into reading and stuff because of Harry Potter and stuff. And as I say, I love the movies. I
was just surprised that it was the one that I liked least because, you know, it is such a popular series. You would think that, all right, this lighter one, the easy one, that's going to be the one that I enjoy the most. And no, I enjoyed it the least. Maybe it's because it's the first book and that one really doesn't have a lot to it. I mean, it's pretty thin compared to the other books. We weren't doing the entire series. We were just doing the first one because, you know, it opens up this world of magic, which can be harmful to children, apparently.
Yes.
Yeah.
Free thinking. And obviously the religious connotation of it and all. The Philosopher's Stone is kind of like The Hobbit to The Lord of the Rings, when it's like, it's great and opens up the world, but it doesn't have all the heavy lore and all this sort of other weight.
No, but The Hobbit is more entertaining than the first Harry Potter book.
Yes. Yeah. I've not read The Hobbit. I've not read any of the Lord of the Rings books, but from what I've heard, I probably agree.
You should at least read The Hobbit.
It's not Star Wars. I got time. I've seen the movies.
It's so narrow. The movie is a lot. The 3 movies, it's like there's no reason there should be 3 movies from that little book.
No, I mean Legolas wasn't even in it. The whole love story with the woman, the elf, and the dwarf, and all that nonsense.
I only watched the first one. I was so disgusted.
The first one is the worst one, to be fair. The second one's pretty good. The extended versions are actually better. The third one, extended, is brilliant. Mainly, I mean, there's a lot of nonsense in it, don't get me wrong, but it's actually... Over here, our age ratings are 12, 15, and 18. And the third one, extended, is actually a 15. It's the only Lord of the Rings Hobbit film that's a 15, because the final battle is so gory. It's very cool. You can watch like a scene of it on YouTube if you wanted to. But, you know, I'm a simple guy in certain ways. I like that sort of thing. But I will just say to your comment about you not liking Harry Potter as much as the other ones, that's because when have you ever found the easy way to be the best way in your entire life?
I don't think I have.
Well, that's why.
Which is evidenced by my schedule, right?
Yes. Well, I've never spoken with you and thought, you know what Tonya likes? The easy way out. That's never the impression I get. So that doesn't surprise me. I could have told you that before you started reading them. But, you know, thought I'd let you get to it yourself. Pat on the head. Condescension. I'm sorry.
You've had a dog too long.
Yes, that is true. But Will, is any sort of further things? I know we went on a big tangent, and I've actually been speaking a lot here when it's actually meant to be all about you, so apologies for that. But are there any sort of final
these
things?
Are conversations.
I know.
Not monologues.
But but I do monologue quite a lot. That's the problem. That's what I'm apologising for, is it's meant to be more of a conversation than me just kind of waffling on. But are there any sort of final notes? Like, for example, when you're putting this on YouTube, is that going to go on its own YouTube channel? You pick it on the 52 Love? Where are you going to... Or if you don't figure that out...
I'm just going to put it on the the Tonya Todd YouTube account. So Ms. Tonya Todd. I didn't want it to be confused with 52 Love, even though it would reach more people that way. It's not the same theme. It's a different project. And who knows, maybe next year I will give it its own, I thought this was going to be a one-time thing when I started it. So maybe next year I will create its own feed, even though it's only going to be for a week-long project.
Is that what you thought when you killed my podcast? This would just be a one-time thing, and then you flash forward to a couple of years, and you're like, I've done about 5 of my own podcasts, and I'm co-hosting this, and I've been on Mike's show about 10 times, and now I've got all these other people.
I was supposed to be a guest on your show. It wasn't supposed to be a lifelong commitment to you and all of your friends, but I couldn't help that you rocked. I mean, I actually was part of a class last week where they were talking about how to be a good podcast guest and how to choose good podcasts and what kind of relationships can you form by being on a podcast. And it's like, well, I had my own story of my publicist is the one who set this up. I had never heard of Mike. He had never heard of me. We were connected through one podcast and we ended up hitting it off so much talking about nerd stuff that you asked me to come back and just do a show about movies and comics, which was way more fun than anything I had ever done online. Like any other interview I'd ever done. That was the best. Nobody wants to talk about themselves. We want to talk about the media that we love.
I think a lot of people do want to talk about themselves. Like a lot.
Maybe for 15 minutes, but it gets old.
It does. Yeah. I could talk about myself a lot, but that's.
But you're not talking about yourself. You're talking about the things you love. That is you.
Yeah.
The content you consume, those are the bits of your personality that you share.
Yeah.
And look what happened as a result. I ended up meeting Tony and I ended up meeting Megan, and I got to know all of these amazing people and get connected with the entire Comics in Motion crew. How many of them are are on my series? I've been on their shows. I've had people I know here in the States connect with you there. It was probably the best podcast experience of my life because of all of the connections. So even though I like the show we recorded later better, I'm grateful, I'm most grateful for the first one because look what I got out of it.
You got me as an earworm for the rest of your life. It's part of it. Once the Comics in Motion guys get our hooks in someone, you can't get out. I warned Ada of this as well when I spoke with her, and Alison as well.
But she's awesome.
I know. It's one of the problems. It's like, it's funny, it sounds somewhat egotistical, but like as soon as you get connected with the Comics in Motion guys, it's very hard to get unconnected because there's so many of us, whatever part of nerddom or fandom.
But it's not just guys. Rhea is there.
Well, when I said guys, I meant people.
So the crew. Apologies. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't mean to gender that. I've been in Star Wars Comics in Canada. I stopped saying hello, guys. I try and say hi, friends now, and genuine chit-chat because my mum once said, she did nothing about the podcast because she doesn't listen to them. She was like, I hate when people call a group of people guys. I hate that. And I was like, well, I'm going to have to stop doing it then, aren't I? So, not because of my mum.
I don't hate it. I know I'm guilty of it, but she was one of the biggest draws for me to join the Discord channel.
Yeah.
So I never thought of it as joining a group of guys. It was joining this crew that included Mike and Tony and Rhea. Like those were the 3 big names. But, I got closer to Jack as a result of it. I got to know Dave. I got to know Spider-Dan, like all of these really cool people. And they're all in the same place. It was really weird because you think there's going to be the one creep in here that you wish wasn't part of the group. I must be me because I must be that for everybody else because I'm not finding that person in there.
No, they don't exist yet. But I think all of us probably think we are that person. I think Spider-Man probably thinks he's that person. And I think that I often think I'm that person. And then I think Tony maybe thinks he's that person. And it's like, none of us
no way.
are actually. Yeah, but Tony is the greatest human alive. And he doesn't think he is. So it's one of those. I know he'll listen to this as well. But any opportunity to talk about Tony and tell the world how great he is just delightful. But we must end this soon because you are busy and I'm ill. So I need to go and try and get some rest, which will result in me actually just laying in bed and read. But sort of final things about the banned books. Obviously, I'll include links in the description and that sort of thing. But just final things you want to say about it.
Well, a lot of questions that I receive are what can people do to help in their own lives? What can they do to be an advocate in their own lives? And I would say, figure out something that works for you. You don't want to do something that you don't enjoy just so that you're doing something. You can buy banned books. You can post about it. You can leave reviews for those books that telling people what you learned from reading those books. You can start a banned book club and read them and have discussions about it. You can record yourself reading from banned books, though I would keep those short because people don't have large attention spans for that kind of thing. Maybe share passages that you really enjoyed from it. And you can share those videos with your audience, or you can host your own conversations about why you read banned books and why they matter to you.
That's fantastic. I'll make sure I include links in the description to obviously your YouTube channel, as well as the pod. Are you going to put it on podcast feeds as well? I assume you probably would.
Dave said he was going to put it on the Comics in Motion feed, and Tony said he would put it on Pop Gorillas.
Awesome. Brilliant. So obviously people can check those out. I'll put those in the description, as well as anything else that Tonya wants to put in there. Obviously you've got your website, MissTonyaTodd.com. You've got yourself on social media, which is at Miss Tonya Todd as well. Is that everything? Obviously if there's anything we forget, I can check it in the show notes after the fact, but I thought I'd say it for anyone who doesn't check
those. Are the important things.
Yeah.
But I like that you already know all. I didn't even need to plug myself. There you are. See how good Mike is.
Well, there's another statement which could be taken very differently if this is a different podcast. But yes, delightful. Well, it's always a pleasure to speak with you via recorded or non-recorded. If it was up to me, we'd be talking for the next 4 hours. But, you're busy, so we can't. But, thank you so much for coming on. And obviously, people need to check out banned books. Even if you're one of those listeners of this show and you're just like, I want more Megan. She's on the Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone one. And that's probably going to be the easy entry point for most people because everyone has either read Harry Potter or at least heard of Harry Potter. So I'd say that's probably quite a good one to kind of... And I think, is that the first episode you're releasing as well?
It is not.
Okay. Well, I've just spoiled everything then. How do you know... Have you already figured out the order? And if so, are you willing to say where Harry Potter...
I have figured out the order. You will just have to wait and see.
Well, there you go. So probably check out the first episode, but if you are a little bit uneasy, wait a week and then tune into the Harry Potter one so you can hear Megan's lovely voice. And I won't even be there, so I won't be verbally waterboarding anyone there. And then that would potentially be a starting point if anyone is a bit apprehensive about delving into that realm, just because of Harry Potter being so well known and being so... Everyone's at least heard of Harry Potter, at least, and then you can get a vibe of what sort of questions and conversations that Tonya has, and then you can delve into some of the other books that are less familiar. But I would always say to people, when you listen to podcasts, don't just go with what is familiar to you. It's normally the shows that you are not, that you kind of choose on a whim. They're often the ones that are actually the most impactful. They're often the ones that change elements of your life. They're the ones, the things you don't expect that really change you. Because normally if you listen to something you expect, it's just, yeah, that was pretty good. So,
and it's just validating what you already think.
Exactly. And as Tonya's already said in this, it's not everyone agrees with everyone the whole time in these conversations. So there is discourse, which is what is needed in these sorts of conversations, because we need other opinions and things. But thank you once again, Tonya. It's always delightful speaking with you. Links to everything in the show notes. As I always say, guys, check out the show notes. I put a lot of time and effort into those. And because people like Tonya tell me...
Show notes are the best. I will say that when I'm doing other shows and I have one of your guests, I'll just go to your show where you had them and I will copy it because you already took care of everything.
I'm going to start charging for that kind of service because that stuff takes me ages. When I spoke with Ada recently, she because I asked her some recommendations for books and things, and she's so passionate and stuff, she gave me loads. And I was delighted, but when I was editing it, it took me about half an hour to search through every single thing and find either links or the correct names.
You need people to send. What would you like me to include in the show notes? That's what you want. Just send it to me and I will put it in the show notes.
Yeah, sometimes. But then also with people, a lot of the time I have guests who are not as extroverted as I am. There's certain people who've not really been on podcasts as much, and I don't want to scare them off and be like, right, because I've been on guest podcasts.
No, I have homework for you.
Yeah, I'm just like, come on my show, have a chat, be comfortable, and I'll sort out everything else. And that's generally... That's how I get them in the door. And then they start their own podcast and realise how much bloody work it is.
Yeah. Well, I was grateful that 52 Love was only 1 year. I was grateful to do it. It was an amazing experience. I had just spectacular guests on that, including you and Megan. But it ran its course, and I was grateful to have that time to do other things, and then, fill it with with more projects.
Absolutely stellar. Well, yeah, that's brilliant, Tonya. I'll encourage everyone to check this out. I'll share it on social media and things, and all of the other stuff going on. And yeah, guys, read more books. If that's anything to take away from this, whether banned or not, just read more, To quote RuPaul, reading is fundamental. I can't even talk because my nose is blocked up. Oh, that was a horrible noise. I'm going to have to cut that out. Sorry, Tonya, to hear that. Reading is fundamental. There we go. That was awful. I've been muting myself so frequently with that, and that noise was just awful. I could hear it in my own headphones, so it was like a loop. Ugh. Sorry, guys, and sorry, Tonya.